Fire is a hazard on construction sites in general, but on timber frame sites the buildings are more vulnerable to fire because the precautions for the finished building are not yet in place. As timber is a combustible product, the fire risks on site are increased, and these risks need to be managed and controlled very carefully in comparison with more traditional construction methods. In 2014, the HSE published an open letter stating that failure by all those involved with the design, specification, procurement and construction of timber frame structures to assess and reduce the fire risk during construction could be faced with HSE enforcement action and potentially large fines as a result. In the early stages of the planning or design stage of the project, you should consider whether or not timber frame is the most suitable option or whether you should stick to more traditional construction methods. You should consider the site location. Is it in an area surrounded by other occupied properties? And how close will they be to your nearest timber frame structure on site? Will you have enough space on site to keep flammable and combustible materials and also your site facilities a minimum safe distance away from the timber frame structures? Zero tolerance of smoking and strict controls of hot works will be very important. A sufficient fire risk assessment must be completed to take into account the site-specific risks and hazards and what control measures will be required. Additionally, if you are to be on a site where you have neighbouring properties outside of your boundary, then you will need to consider the risk of fire spread into those properties. So an off-site fire risk assessment should be completed so that you can identify what control measures, if any, will be required. You may need to use a different class of timber which has a reduced level of combustibility, or install fire retardant sheeting or some other type of fire break. It's important that the required control measures are implemented and maintained during the construction phase. The Structural Timber Association, formerly known as the UK Timber Frame Association, has a website with lots of information which is free to download once you've registered your details. A copy of the 16 Steps to Fire Safety Guide is very useful and specifies the expected steps to take on site. For example, electronic fire alarms are to be used, not fire bells or air horns. And also there must be at least 2 emergency escape routes to all levels until plasterboarding works are completed. Another useful STA document is the Design Guide to Separating Distances During Construction. As the name implies, it gives useful information regarding the required separation distances. The HSE, as usual, also has some good guidance and also free to download. The Scaffolding Guidance document SG 2817, titled Safe System of Work for Scaffolding Associated with Timber Frame Building Construction, is also a useful document. And it should be noted that scaffolding around timber frame structures is not TG 2013 compliant, and it must be designed. You can also ask one of us as your safety advisors for advice, or call the BSG office for further information and advice.